Hello, I'm Mike Apatra, and I'm the host of the Hoop Ball DFS Today podcast. Come join us as we go game by game, breaking down our top plays, fades, values, pivots, and talk overall strategy for both tournaments and cash games. And the best part, we're doing this 7 days a week. So come check us out. That's Hoop Ball DFS Today. And you can follow me on Twitter at Mike Apatra for any updates, listener contests, and DFS information.
The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another week of Fantasy NBA Today. I am your host, Dan Vespris, and this is, as always, a Hoop Ball presentation. It's Monday. We are through a week of the actual NBA playoffs. We have seen two teams swept out of the bubble, eliminated. So we bid farewell, first thing on this Monday edition, to the Philadelphia 76ers and the Brooklyn Nets. The Pacers are on the brink of disaster. They play later today in a possible third sweep, and every other series is at least mildly contested to this point, which is, by all accounts, a pretty good thing, and also another striking indictment of the imbalance in the NBA between the Eastern and Western conferences and how top-heavy the Eastern Conference is. So top-heavy. We complained about that, and even while I was complaining about it, I was like, well, maybe the Clippers will dispatch of the Mavs pretty quickly. Or, I don't know, maybe the Lakers will sort of wake up and beat down on the Blazers. And as I was saying it, I was like, no, it really is top-heavy because the Nets are not good, or they weren't this year, at least. They were good enough. They played hard, give them credit, they played hard, but Toronto's a really good team, and Toronto knew better than to take anyone lightly. They came in and they whomped them. Milwaukee had a one-game wake-up call, but they appear to now have Orlando pretty well in hand. The Heat and the Pacers are actually it's a pretty closely matched series, and then in every single game, Miami just pulls away by 8 to 10 points right at the end of the ball game. It's happening in every single game. It's crazy how unbelievably repetitive that series has been. Miami by 9 in the third game. Miami by 9 in the second game. Miami by 12 in the first game. And every one of those was competitive basically until the start of the fourth quarter. And then Miami's like, all right, it's time for percentages to win out. We're going to be talking to Adam King here shortly on the podcast about fantasy stuff, believe it or not. Yes, we found something interesting to dig into. By the way, you can follow me on Twitter at Dan Vespris, DanBesbris. Clarion call here at the beginning of the podcast for those in the betting community. I know we've been talking a lot about that on the pods these days. If you are huge into sports betting and you'd like to jump on over to the other side of the curtain, hit me up at Dan Vespris on Twitter or email teamhoopball@hoop-ball.com is the email address. Again, teamhoopball@hoop-ball.com. We are looking to add to our ranks. Ira and Devin and Troy right now makes up a very lean, mean betting machine, but it's time to expand, and that could be you if you hit me up and you get through our litany of questions, the battery here. You could be part of that betting team to join Today in Sports Betting, Today Hoop Ball Gaming, the Twitter feed. We want you. Picture me pointing at you. What I'd like to do on today's podcast, before we dive into the fantasy stuff, is very quickly preview today's games because one is starting in an hour. That's Orlando-Milwaukee. Milwaukee favored by 13, total of 225.5. These games have now sort of equilibrated a bit. They've got the numbers right. Milwaukee is winning these games by around that margin. They won by 15 back on Thursday. They won by 14 over the weekend. The totals were close. It was 228 over the weekend. It was a little bit low. It went under all those games. Remember last week I said look for game twos and game threes to maybe go under as these teams now finally feel each other out. By this time, by game 4, the lines are pretty tight. There's not going to be a whole lot of fluffy value built in, but we'll keep doing our live in-game stuff. This is, by the way, an opportunity for Milwaukee to go up 3-1 in the series. This is a series where, to this point, Orlando's shown a lot of fight, and I would be pretty surprised if they didn't continue to do so in this ball game. There's sort of no reason not to. They aren't dead in the water yet, the way that Brooklyn was. And even Philly, you could make the argument they were basically dead in the water. Philly should have been able to keep up better than they did. And they were very competitive in 2 of those 3 games. In fact, they were leading by 2 with, I think, 90 seconds left in game 3. And then Boston scored the last 10 points of the ball game. Whoops. Houston, Oklahoma City. Nice to see the Thunder actually wake up and play a little bit in the 3rd game of that series. I'm still not a believer that Oklahoma City has figured something out. They shot 44.5%, and won that game 119-107 in overtime. So that game just barely went over the total after overtime. And it's worth noting that the Rockets, outside of Jeff Green, really shot the ball horribly in that ball game. Meanwhile, over on the Thunder side, the only Thunder player that didn't have a great ball game was Danilo Gallinari, and his game still ended up okay because he took 8 and made all 8 of his free throws. Steven Adams is probable, by the way, for this ball game coming up. Dennis Schroeder was great. He had 29. Chris Paul, 26. He's been extremely efficient. He looks great in these playoffs. Shea had 23, 7 and 6 with 5 defensive stats and 3 3-pointers. It took everything, man. I still don't see, other than the fact that Oklahoma City is hunting whatever maybe small mismatches they can find, I still don't fully see how even a decent game from Houston doesn't beat them pretty much every time. In addition, in a sort of a weird twist, Harden missed a bunch of free throws and fouled out of this ball game. Daniel House missed a few free throws. Houston shot under 70% at the foul line for the ball game. So did OKC, by the way. Although Nerlens Noel missing 3 and Steven Adams missing 3 contributed pretty heavily to that because Gallo made all 8 of his. Schroeder went 7 out of 9. Shea 2 for 2. So it was mostly the big men taking a dump on the Thunder's free throw percent. They've been calling this series pretty loose. They've been letting them beat each other up pretty good. There were more free throws in this one because, they played an extra 5 minutes, but they're letting them fight. Luguentz Dort has done a really nice job defensively on James Harden. Presumably, they'll just sort of stick with that. I've got to think that at some point, the lobbying will kick in, and you'll see Harden get a couple more calls. The fact that Dort only had 3 fouls in an overtime game was pretty surprising. So, again, it only takes an okay game from Houston to win. So I do lean in their direction again. I know that it's one of the things that's a little bit weird about all of these series is that there's no change of home court. So there's a couple things going on in that regard. And maybe the biggest one, and I'll try to wrap up this thought as quick as I can, but it struck me as I was watching them is this would be, if ever there was a time where a team could actually come back from being down 3-0 or potentially 3-1. I know we've seen that happen before. It's quite rare, but we've seen it happen. This would be the spot for it for a couple of reasons. Number one, you could make the argument, look, if you go up 3-0 or 3-1, you are more than likely just the better team in the series. But little things can now change a series in a much bigger way, where, say, take Miami, Indiana. That game is the third one on our docket today. By the way, the line in that second game, Rockets by 2.5, total of 224.5. I think that's pretty spot on. Line in game 3, Miami by 6, total of 216.5. The reason that this popped into my head was looking at this ball game. Miami finally now favored by a pretty big number. It had very slowly climbing. They were favored by what the hell was the first number in that series? Miami, they were 4-point favorites. then 4.5, then 5, and now finally it's climbed to 6 as they continue to beat that number in every ball game. Now, normally, I would look at a 3-0 series and say, it's done. The team that's down 3-0 can just mail it in at this point. And let's be clear here. Miami has shown themselves to be the better team. It's not dumb luck that they found themselves up 3-0 in the series. Malcolm Brogdon had a huge ball game, the last one, and they still lost. They shot 49% and still lost because Miami took 52 free throws in what was a truly egregiously ugly ball game, just from an officiating standpoint. Like, you just can't let a team take 52 free throws and expect people to continue to watch the basketball game. Victor Oladipo fouled out. Brogdon had 5 fouls, 4 apiece for TJ Warren, Miles Turner, Aaron Holiday, and Jakar Sampson, and they were just basically all shooting fouls, like 52 free throws. I know there were some down the stretch, but Jimmy Butler took 20. Adebayo had 9. Those two guys had 29 between the two of them. Jay Crowder, Duncan Robinson took 6. Okay, I get it. I'm sure a lot of them were fouls, but it's time to take the belt buckle back one notch. That's too many. That's too many, guys. So anyway, the point of all of this is, look, Miami's the better team. They've won all 3 games. They've won them not decisively, but they've won them with the better stretch play in particular. Jimmy Butler hit a couple of big 3-pointers in the first 2 wins. Game 3 was more about his free throw shooting and the contributions. Again, Goran Dragic has been amazing in the playoffs so far. Adebayo, when he's in, Miami wins. It's as simple as that. It's why I faded them in Game 2, because he got into foul trouble, and then he stopped picking up fouls after that point. Tyler Hero has been very good. Jay Crowder has been solid. Duncan Robinson has been his usual self. Miami just has the right mixture right now, where Indiana, as good as they played in that third game offensively, they still weren't great defensively, and then obviously committed too many fouls. So under normal circumstances, you'd look at what's happening right now. By the way, Indiana was technically the favorite, so if this was outside of the bubble, my guess is they probably would have won one of those first 2 games. Miami probably would have won both of their home games, and you'd be going back to Indiana with Miami up 3-1. But let's forget that for a moment, and let's pretend that Miami was the favorite, that they were the 4. Because come on, you're splitting hairs at this point. Miami, let's say they were up 3-0 on Indiana outside the bubble, and let's say Game 4, well, it doesn't really matter. Let's say it was in Miami, like it would have been. Indiana goes in there, and they're like, look, we're cooked, man. We're cooked. There's 2 more games in Miami in this series. We'd have to win 2 road games in addition to the 2 games we'd have to win back home, which, by the way, would also include a Game 7, and it would be 4 in a row. Indiana, in that situation, it'd be very easy to just give up. If Miami hit him in the mouth in a game in Miami, to just say, meh, all right, well, we're not getting it. We're done. What if Game 4 was in Indiana? You might feel inclined to play a little bit, but at the same time, they're just like, look, even if we win this game at home, we still have to win 2. Like, we still have to go back and win 2 in Miami. There's a mental thing going on there where you're like, look, we're down 3-0. To win this series, we're going to have to win 2 road games against a team that's better than us right now. What if someone got hurt on the Miami side? Let's extend this hypothetical a little bit farther. What if Goran Dragic got hurt? They still have this looming road situation hanging over their heads. And that's actually one of the reasons why I think it's a little different in the bubble, is that for Indiana, they can just say, look, this series is close, and there's never a game where they get a court advantage. If we can just tip things in our favor, if someone on their side goes down for 2 games with an injury, and it levels off because, we don't have Sabonis or Jeremy Lamb. If someone on that side gets hurt, and all of a sudden, they're not a 5 or 6 point favorite, but like a 2-point favorite for every game the rest of the series, in Indiana's mind, they never have to think about going on the road. It's just like, look, every game's a coin flip. Let's just go out there and play our butts off. Maybe we get 4 heads in a row or whatever it turns out to be. So I'm not counting Indiana out. In fact, them getting 6 points is, to me, it's sort of asking me to bet on the Indiana side. Total of 217.5, I'm fine with. I don't know how the officials are going to call it. I'm hoping there's not 85-90 free throws again, but it is what it is. And then finally, the last game on the docket tonight, Lakers and Blazers. Lakers by 7, total of 225.5. Lakers defense has been terrific. We saw Anthony Davis wake up in the second half. I actually thought Portland played a better game than the Lakers for most of Saturday's contest, and it didn't matter. The Lakers shot 50% because Portland just couldn't stop them when they got near the bucket. Lakers took a ton of free throws, but it didn't matter because they couldn't make any of them. In fact, the fouls were relatively even by the end of the ballgame. Lakers barely had more points than Portland at the free throw line despite taking 25 additional free throws. Carmelo Anthony played well. C.J. McCollum played well. Dame was decent, if somewhat unspectacular in this one. They got big contributions from all of those guys, and it still wasn't enough. LeBron was great. AD was great. And the Lakers held Portland once again to just 41% shooting. They're just suffocating them. And for the Blazers, I watched that game, and I just kept thinking, they just keep making jump shots. They just keep going down. Mid-range from Melo, mid-range from McCollum, some 3 balls. Dame, 3-pointers regularly. The issue with the Blazers right now is they don't get much that's easy. I get it. They're very good shooters, so for them, some of those shots are easier than the average Bear. But they're just not, where are the dunks? Where are the layups? Where are the easy buckets that pull your field goal percent up a little bit? That's why I looked at these numbers now. I was like, look, Melo, McCollum, Dame, those guys all shot 40% or better on heavily and largely contested jump shots. And at the end of it, I'm thinking, look, if they're going to make that many jump shots, they got to win the ball game, and they didn't. And that's a bad side for Portland. Good sign for the Lakers is that they're starting to get a few little, tiny nuggets of contribution from guys besides LeBron and AD. Danny Green hit a couple of 3-pointers in that one. That's all they need out of him is to hit a couple of threes. Alex Caruso was fantastic in Game 3. 10 points, 4 boards, 7 assists. That might be the best game he's played as a pro. And KCP hit 3 more threes, although, frankly, it took him too many shots to get there. What are you doing taking 13 shots? All right, at least he's confident. And the Lakers are just gigantic. They're so big that Yusuf Nurkic. Did you guys watch that game on Saturday? I watched that game on Saturday. It's one of the few games I got to watch every second of over the weekend. The Blazers were so gassed by the end of that game. Nurkic looked like he could barely stand up. I'm a little worried someone's going to get hurt. He played 35 minutes, which is not an insane number, but the Lakers are just beating the hell out of him. So we'll see. 7 points is a lot to cover because Portland's not going anywhere. They're not going to lie down, but I'll tell you, they have to hit all of those jumpers if they want to hang in there. Or they have to defend a lot better, but, we've seen 80 games out of the Blazers now, and it doesn't look like they're going to defend. All of these lines, all of this fun we're having is with our buddies over at mybookie.ag. Join us in our quest to double, triple, quadruple our bankrolls. Put in a minimum deposit of $45 with promo code HOOPBALL at mybookie.ag. You can deposit match if you like. You can ignore them, but please do use promo code HOOPBALL when you sign up. All one word, HOOPBALL. That'll let them know that we sent you, and then you can bet along with us here. All of our leans, all of our in-game stuff. I know Brew is posting his plays on Twitter, and then the guys over at Hoopball Gaming are doing a terrific job. Again, that's mybookie.ag. Head there now. They've been stellar, especially on the customer service side. They've been wonderful for us. We've sort of tested out all the different things before we wanted to sort of jump into the sack here with a company like that, and they've been wonderful. They've checked all the boxes. So please do give them a try. Again, minimum deposit $45. Promo code is HOOPBALL. Who said there's no fantasy stuff to talk about right now? Oh, wait. That was me. That was me who said that. I may have jumped the gun a tiny bit. So with that, we welcome back to the show one of our good friends, the assistant managing editor, right here at Hoop Ball. The great Adam King. What's up, man? It's let's see. I said I wasn't going to talk about what time it was, but I like to play the time zone game anytime I'm on a call with someone who's not within 3 time zones of me. So it's 2:15 in the afternoon here. What time is it where you're at?
It is 7:15 a.m. where I am.
The next
nice
day.
And early. Yeah, on Saturday and a day after you, so I'm in the future.
It's just it never ceases to boggle my mind. I mean, I totally understand how it all works, and it's the only way that folks can have their daytimes, but it just seems crazy to me that you and I are talking, and your weekend has just begun, and I'm still right smack in the middle of the last day of my work week. It just seems crazy. It seems like you should be able to tell me what's happening in the future. I like maps, so maybe that's part of it. But regardless, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good to be here again. Very cold, very different weather too, I would say. It's pretty cold here. It got to a top. I'm just doing a bit of a conversion here, and I think that our top temperature yesterday was around 40.
And are you converting to Fahrenheit now?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
so what is that?
40 Fahrenheit. So that's 5 degrees
Celsius. 5 Celsius.
Here.
Okay, so I remember how to do this. It's 9/5 plus 32. I remember this.
Yes, it is, according to Google. You're correct.
I tutored SAT math for a little bit in my younger years. So that's an easy one. If you're 5 Celsius, that just goes to 9, and then you add 32. So, yeah, that'd be 41. Easy peasy. Yeah.
Yes.
Going the other way is harder. You subtract 32, and then you do 5/9. So it's 83 where I'm at right now. So minus 32 would get you to 51, and 5/9 of 51 is, what is that? 9 goes into that about 5.5 times. Times 5 is what?
27-ish, 27.5.
Somewhere in that neck of the woods. Okay, there you go. So that's where we're at over here. Yeah, it's not bad, actually. I live in West LA. We're about 3.5 miles from an ocean, so that tends to keep things relatively temperate. So by the way, you can follow Adam on Twitter, and you should, at AdamKing91. You have a great, great Twitter feed. One of the most, if not the most active fantasy experts out there. It's part of why I love following you and talking to you. And you've come to the pod to talk about something that's not playoffs or betting, which is great because that's the only stuff I've been talking about lately. You've got an early look at next season's fantasy stuff, whenever the hell next season turns out to be. So let's dive right on in. What you got for us?
Really just, creating content, really, because there isn't anything else. So I just thought I'd do a bit of a top 12 for next season. There's no real big surprises in there, but maybe a couple of players that we can have a little bit of a chat about that you may or may not agree with. So, that's all, I guess. Just finding something to talk about.
Are they top 12 in order, or just your favorite 12 of any ilk?
No, look, let's go top 12 in order.
Okay. All right, get us started. Who's your number? Well, is this 8 or 9, Cat, first of all?
We had a bit of a discussion about this. I'm going to go 8, Cat, for this, just because I just don't like turnovers as a category. So I tend to, even when I draft in 9 cat, I tend to not pay a lot of attention to turnovers. And I also tend to punt a lot more than you do, I think. So
in roto or head-to-head or both?
No, in head-to-head.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I'm actually okay with it. I know I need to do a better job, I think, on this pod of sort of elucidating what I mean when I talk about my different strategies. I never punt in roto on draft day. I do what I've referred to affectionately as give up on a category. If I'm like second from the bottom in something and I can trade someone on my team who, say, is good in points or whatever I'm second from the bottom in and boost myself by 1 or 2 slots in, say, rebounds and blocks, then the ROI on that move makes a lot of sense. In head-to-head, I'm in an 11 category head-to-head league that I punt turnovers and field goal percent every single year almost without fail. So I am not adamantly against it. I think it's actually a good strategy mostly because of playoffs. I love getting that first round bye, and that's a little harder to do if you're punting. But once you're in the postseason, you want the team that's going to win 5 or more categories reliably every week. So I'm not staunchly opposed to it, and so I'm going to just tune my mind to head-to-head mode for this discussion today, which makes me think number one is not actually a question mark. Because if it's 9 Cat, there's a little question on number one. 8 Cat, there's no question on number one.
No, there isn't. It's James Harden.
Yeah, it's an easy.
As much as I'd like to make a case for someone else, he's just, he's pretty incredible. I mean, this season he was far and away the number one player.
Yeah, I'm looking at the numbers. I think Anthony Davis was number 2, and I think James Harden was worth like 1.5 Anthony Davises in 8 Cat. That's crazy.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, he's far and away the best player, and I guess you look at his scoring and assists, those numbers. But it really is his defense that sort of helps him there. I mean, you look at his steal value. Although he's never sort of considered a sort of a top-notch defender, he racks up those numbers. He was 4th in the league in steals.
Yeah, he's really good at jumping passing lanes. Really good at that.
Yeah.
I think he just has a knack for knowing what another team's offensive player is thinking. Like, he knows where guys are going to be because it's what he looks at on offense every play as the initiator, especially now with Westbrook out for Houston. And, he played without a premier usage guy alongside of him for a while. I think that there's that sort of savant nature with Harden where he sees someone else coming downhill towards him, and he's like, oh, well, he's going to go to that guy in the corner. I'm going to jump that passing lane. And he's become a better one-on-one defender, but the steals numbers are largely him picking off stuff and just reading another player's offense better than most other guys can. You make a great point. He's at 2.7. He almost blocked a shot a game this year. 2.7 combined steals and blocks. That's elite level combo numbers in those things. There's only like 5 to 10 guys in the league that are doing more combined steals and blocks than James Harden was.
Yeah, if you look at the top 12 from this year, there's only 3 players other than Harden who averaged more than 0.9 blocks per game. So while it's not a mind-blowing number, obviously 0.9, it makes a difference when you, especially, we know how much of an impact those defensive numbers have on fantasy value. So look, pretty clear number one. Barring an injury or something like that, I don't see anyone overtaking him next year.
Right, and I know that the discussion here isn't really whether or not to take him number one. It is interesting to get into the minutia a tiny bit. When you look at the other guys, again, James Harden at 2.7 combined steals and blocks. The other guys in the NBA that are at that mark or better are Andre Drummond, Ben Simmons, Anthony Davis, and Jonathan Isaac. And Rob Covington. And I think that's it. 2.7 combined or higher. I think that's the list. There might be one other guy, like if you take Nurkic's games in the bubble, he falls into that group, but you're talking about 8 games at that point that didn't count during a regular season for most people. I don't believe anyone else in the NBA was at 2.7 combined or higher, and Harden gets, like you said, all of his credit for his scoring, but he's actually, what did I just list off? 5 names, top 5 defensive stats guys in the NBA.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and that's why that's why he's number one, because he contributes everywhere. His field goal percentage is up and down, but that's not really a bother when you're scoring that many points and doing other things.
Yeah, when he's premier elite in free throws, steals, assists, threes, and scoring, and for a guard, well above average in blocks and rebounds. Yeah, tough to argue with that one. Obviously it's number one, but we're just sort of going through the reasons why that maybe go under the radar a little bit. Okay, number 2. Let's make things a little bit more interesting here. This is where you have to make a couple of decisions. Who's number 2 on your board?
Yeah, a few decisions here. So I went with Anthony Davis at number 2 again. He was number 2 this year reasonably comfortably. There isn't as much of a gap between him and number 3 as there was between Harden and Davis. But I think that injury, the sort of injury tag, people are, do I draft him? Is he going to play all the games? I think that's almost gone now. I don't know how many, you're a Lakers fan, how many games did he miss this year? It wouldn't have been many.
Now I've got all my stuff mishmashed here. Before the bubble, I think he was at 58 before the bubble. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that'd be about right.
Because now it all got mushed together. He's at 64 altogether. I think he played in 6 out of the 8 bubble games. I might be off by 1 or 2. It's hard.
Yep.
It's hard to get the right stats from the pre-shutdown. But yeah, I think he missed like 7 games before the shutdown.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, look, I think LeBron James is obviously he's getting on a bit in age. He's still amazing for his age, but I think it's going to become, well, if it's not already, it's going to become Davis's team. So I think there's scope there for him to actually add to his scoring and that sort of thing over the next couple of seasons. So yeah, I think you'd still be pretty safe taking him at number 2.
Yeah, I'm with you. You know I'm a big Anthony Davis fan. I think he got a bad rap for being soft when the Pelicans just didn't want to play him. If they didn't have a shot to win things, they were going to shut him down for little stuff, and now he plays through. I mean, I make my jokes about it being irritable bowel, but the simple fact is he gets nicked up, he goes back, gets himself taped, and comes back to the ball game. He's been, outside of nailing his tailbone, I think he missed 3 or 4 games for that. Otherwise, he was pretty damn durable this year, and it wasn't the kind of heart attack season that everybody talks about. The thing is, like, there are still those moments with him where you're hoping he comes back in the ball game, but at the same time, I feel like we have to put this all in perspective. People were debating whether to take Anthony Davis or Karl Anthony Towns because one was durable and the other one wasn't, but then look what happened. It's that old adage, like, you're only healthy until you're not. You're only not healthy until you are. I don't subscribe to the Anthony Davis being injury prone thing. Largely because the 1 year in New Orleans where they were decent, he played games. He played through stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I'm with you on AD at number 2. I see no reason to back off of that one. He did have a little space between himself and the number 3 guy, and some of that space was created. That space shrunk during the bubble when he wasn't playing well or full games, and the guy right behind him this last year was playing full games, like 42 minutes a night. And I'm looking at this last season. Dame was number 3. Is he your number 3 guy in 8-cap for next year, or are you going another direction?
Another direction. I think you could make a case for probably the next few guys that I've got. You could sort of mix it up a little bit depending on whether you're focusing on one stat or just if you have a preference to one player over the other. So number 3, I've actually gone Steph Curry.
Looking for the comfortable, healthy bounce back?
Yeah, I think so. I like to think that the Warriors are going to be, back to full health. They've got they're going to have a nice young piece coming in after the lottery yesterday. And I just think, I think Curry will just be a bit of a point to prove after the last couple of seasons. And we know what he can do. We know what he did that year. I think it was about 2015 or something where he ended as the number 1 player by some ridiculous number. So
yeah, it wasn't close. It wasn't close. No. Let me see if I can figure out when the heck that was. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was the 15-16 season. He just annihilated everyone. KD was number 2 that year. Harden was number 3. Steph, 30 points, 5.5 boards, almost 7 assists, 2 steals, 5 threes on a 50-40-90 season. 50-40-91, actually, if we want to get specific with it. Yeah, he was crazy. And it does... Look, I'm a massive Warriors proponent for this coming year. I totally misread the situation. I thought this season was going to be the prove-it year, like we're still good without KD, but then when Steph got hurt, that all got obliterated. But Draymond has been very vocal about the fact that like he's going to turn back the clock for next year. He's ready to prove things again. I'm on board with drafting as many Warriors as humanly possible this coming season, and so I don't know that I can really argue with you on the Steph at 3. Maybe just on the note of he probably goes later than that, wouldn't you think? Not by much, but some.
Yeah. Look, I think, this is sort of where I would be taking guys. Like I've got my number 10 player when we get down there is actually someone who I think will go much higher. And there's a pretty obvious reason for why I drop him down, and everyone will understand that. But Yeah, no, look, Curry could drop, I think. So my number 4 is Towns. So Cat, I think, and he could very well go above Curry in many drafts.
Sure. Yeah, good pick.
Yeah.
Good pick. He averaged over 3
Yeah.
turnovers a game, so you're pulling out a stat that was a bit to his detriment this last year. He's doing more passing. Was averaging 4.5 assists a game before his injury. He only logged 35 games this year, but he's set to go big. I mean, they're opening things up in Minnesota. He's with his buddy. That's another team where it seems like a bunch of guys have things to prove. I like it. I mean, I think Cat will be more durable next year. He'll have something to prove. He could have a giant season. He could actually put up numbers pretty similar to what he did this year.
Yeah. No, I think, and they've got, as we saw again with the lottery, they're going to, well, unless they trade, they're going to get the number 1 pick. And while the draft isn't overly strong this season, it still gives them another key piece there. And yeah, no, I think he'll absolutely have something to prove. And the Timberwolves, I think, as a team, have something to prove. They're sort of a consistent underachieving team. So taking him at 4, I'd be pretty comfortable there.
Absolutely. Who do you got at 5?
5 could be one to not cause controversy, but probably started a discussion. So I've got Luka at number 5.
Yeah, that's not that insane. I mean, he was number 8 this year in 8-cat. Turnovers are a big reason why he's at a very different spot at 8 versus 9 category league. So I mean, the thing you look at with him is, can he sustain his free throw shooting over the whole year, or will he have a 3-month major blip where he went from a first rounder to like a late second rounder this year?
Yeah, it really comes down to free throws for him. I think we've seen in the bubble, we've seen in the playoffs that he can rack up numbers, especially on the offensive end. Like, obviously scoring and assists are fantastic. He does have to lift his defensive numbers a little bit. I think that's another area where he could improve. But I mean, you look at how steep the curve has been in regards to his improvements just in the last 12 months. And he's incredible. So I think 5. And look, I could even see some leagues where people are sort of willing to take a little bit of a risk. I could even see Doncic going at number 1 in some leagues. I wouldn't do it. I just think there'll be some people who get the number 1 pick who are just, I just don't want to take Harden.
I just want this other guy on my team. Yeah, that does happen.
Yeah.
People get attached to names. People let their heart dictate things a little bit too much. I mean, Luka's gonna have a giant season, right? Like, I don't know what he does next, but I'm also wouldn't be surprised for him to find something. You know, it does, from a fantasy standpoint, it does feel like the percentages are the areas where he can show the greatest jump. In 8-cat, at the very least. I don't think he's ever going to block shots. If his steals change, it might be from 1 to like 1.1. So it's helpful, but probably not an earth-shattering move there. But, the free throws, the field goal and the free throws got better. They both got better this year, and that's why he was a first-rounder in 8-cat anyway. But that next leap, what you're talking about, from 8th to 5th, that's a big jump, and it's going to require him not being a big drag in free throw percent. And I feel like he can do it. To me, it seemed like a lot of his free throw stuff was like a mental exhaustion element, where he was just making them early and he stopped making them late. And I admit I haven't tracked the bubble free throw shooting as closely as I should, perhaps, but he's an easy first rounder in 8-cat. The question is where do you take him in that round? And so, yeah, it's not insane. I mean, who do you have behind him, so we can maybe argue about whether or not he should be in front of or behind those guys?
So behind him, I've got Lillard. And I mean, as we've seen over the last 2 weeks, I mean, Lillard has a case for being a top 3 player. But I just think he just seems to be forever sort of stuck in that 6-7 range, Lillard, and I'm not sure where he can take his game. I don't know how much he can add to what he's already doing.
It would have to be half-court shots at this point.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, and I think, I mean, the bubble, obviously, it's going to depend how much how much weight they put on the bubble. I mean, if you base it on what he's done in Orlando, he could go second or third, but it's a pretty small sample size. And you look at the whole season, and I think he finished the season at number 3. But the bubble did bump those numbers up.
It did, yeah.
A little bit. And then you've got, like, I've got Curry above him. He obviously didn't play. Towns missed a big chunk of the season. Doncic, I think, is a player that you could see improving quite a bit in certain areas. So that's why I think Lillard sort of then drops back to that number 6, 7 spot. But in saying that, he's probably one of the safer picks. His ceiling and his floor are almost the same.
Yeah, I keep looking at Dame and thinking, when is he going to tire of this treadmill? And he never does. They're just he was remarkable. Like you said, his numbers were bumped up a bit by the bubble. He wasn't third on a per game basis before the bubble. I think he moved in front of Kawhi Leonard and Cat. Now on a totals basis, he was in front of both of those guys just because of games played. But yeah, I mean, you know me, I'm a big Dame fan in fantasy because he fits the Dan Vespers mold of guy you take where you know you're going to get a very productive, like 85 to 95% of games played kind of season out of a first round guy. And he's probably not going to be too flashy. I'll admit, I mean, this year, by all accounts, this is probably like the flashiest fantasy season you could have expected out of Dame. But I'd be thrilled to get him in that 6-7 range next year.
Yeah.
That would be a great spot to get him because you know he's going to get right around that mark, and that's perfect for a first rounder. Just don't screw it up. That's the key. So, all right, that's fair. I'd probably go Dame in front of Luka because I love the safety of it, but I totally get the upshot play there because they're not going to be separated by that much at the end of the day. All right, who's 7?
So 7, I've got Kawhi at number 7. He was number 5 this year on a per game basis. And I think obviously the issue with Kawhi sort of this season, last season is the missed games. But in saying that, I think because we can almost preempt how many games he's going to miss. So whereas, I mean, he didn't really get injured this year. Every game he missed was a management type of game. So there is a little bit of certainty there around him. I guess you know how many games you're going to get, so you can plan for that. So yeah, look, I'd be fairly comfortable taking him at number 7 there. Again, there are a few guys here that I've got in this area who could move up, who could move down. But yeah, no, I think around 7 is good for Kawhi.
And yeah, I'm with you on that one. He does probably a tiny bit less next year if Paul George is actually healthy for the entire season. But he's a very reliable guy. You know he's going to miss his 12 back-to-backs or whatever they turn out to be, and probably a game or two on top of that. But at this point, most guys are missing about 10 games. So with him, you're only missing an extra 3 to 5. It's not that huge of a deal. I think he's a guy, by the way, you can probably... I bet he's a guy you could draft later because I would bet most of my fortune that guys like Trae Young and Giannis get drafted in front of Kawhi next year. You think I'm crazy to say that?
No, I think he's probably someone you could get towards the back end of the first round.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd love that.
Yeah, I think the next 4 names I've got could potentially go above him.
Ooh, all right. Wait, who's next? Now I got to know.
So next I've got Trae Young.
Yeah, he'll go in front of him. I'm almost positive. Trae Young's probably going top 5 or 6 next year.
Yeah, I think Trae and Luka will go very close to each other next season. So yeah, look, I mean, Trae was amazing this year as well, and again, he's sort of one of all these players here that we've gone through already. He and Doncic are obviously the youngest, so. Based on that, they've got plenty of room to improve. So, and even, I mean, Trae Young's jump from his rookie season to this season was pretty amazing. His field goal percentage is a bit of an issue, but again, when you're scoring that many points and handing out that many assists, you don't. Yeah, I mean, field goal percentage, you take what you can get. He has good games, he has bad games, but his free throw percentage is obviously a lot better than Doncic at the moment. So yeah, no, look, I think number 8, I'd be stoked to get him there, but I'm not sure he falls that far actually.
No, I don't. Yeah, he's going pretty early. I'm with you on that one. Does his field goal percent improve? Even if it doesn't, you get a pretty damn good year out of him at this point. The floor is so insanely high with that dude. So he's become now a very safe 8 category first round pick. Who's next guy on your list?
So just on Trae
Sure.
quickly as well. I'm not. It'll be interesting to see how he goes with a full team around him. So with Capella on the floor, I guess. How that impacts things. It's where we've seen him with the squad that he's got, but there's going to be some new players there. So yeah, that'll be curious to see how that plays out as well.
I actually really like the idea of him having a good center to throw things to. That feels nice.
Yeah, no, I think it. I mean, maybe it takes a little bit away from his scoring, but Capella's not a big scorer anyway. So maybe 1 point or something, 1 or 2 points. But in terms of his assists, I mean, he was at 9.3 assists this season. So over 10 next season, I don't think that's unrealistic at all.
Yeah, I have no problem with his shots coming from 21 down to 20. If that means, losing a point and gaining an assist, that's a good trade-off. One of those is worth more than the other in fantasy, 1 point versus 1 assist. So
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
yep.
Totally with you. I've lost track of what number we're on right now. Is this number 8 or 9?
Number 9.
9, okay.
Number 9. So Nikola Jokic, number 9.
Yeah, well, okay, so before you even get into your thoughts on this one, would you ever consider letting someone else get Jokic and then try to trade for him after he sort of waddles his way through the first 4 weeks? Is it about, like, I've thought about this a lot. This has been something I've sat on and thought, do I have the stones to actually just skip him, even if he's the guy I want, and think, you know what, I'm going to trade my second rounder for him 1 month into the season, no matter what their 2 stats are. I feel like I would do it, but then when the time comes, I know I would wimp out. Sorry, now you can go ahead. I jumped on you.
No, look, that's fair. He's not actually a guy that I target very heavily in drafts. He does, I mean, he is known for those slow starts, and there is an option to pick him up a bit later. Whether that's going to be the same next season, the off season may be shorter. I mean, it's a total mystery what happens the next few months, obviously. So yeah, he's not actually a guy that I target. I actually think he gets overdrafted a little bit. I mean, he ended this season at number 11. And that's sort of more where I'd be comfortable taking him, the back of the back end of the first round or early second round, but he will go higher than that. And I think it's just his unique game and his unique skill set that people are drawn to. So obviously his passing ability, his assists. But when you look outside of that number, he's not a big scorer. He's a decent rebounder, but he's not. I wouldn't call him elite. And then defensively, he's. I mean, 0.6 blocks from your center is not great. So while the passing game is incredible and he's the best passing center in the league, there are actually a few not flaws, but areas of his game that could be better, but I don't really see them getting a lot better. So
now, what about
not someone I target?
What about what I like to call the 10th category when I'm doing 9 cap, but I guess it would be the 9th category now, and that's durability. He's shown himself to be extraordinarily durable to the point where you kind of have to say, okay, this feels like this doesn't feel like something we can throw out. This feels like a trend. He played in, I think he missed 1 game this year, which is pretty remarkable for a big man. And so even though he was number 11 by averages, he was number 4 by totals during the regular season. That's a big difference.
It is, yeah. Look, and another reason why he tends to go up there, and I'm probably one to take a little bit more risk when I draft, so sort of hoping that the player that I take is going to play that many games. I think he'll go sort of in that Lillard range of 6, 7, 8, somewhere, and that's safe, but not a huge amount of upside in terms of per game production. But as you said, he rarely misses games, although his frame is different now. obviously we saw when he came back into the bubble, he's a lot leaner and looks more athletic. So what sort of an impact that has on his ability to play every game, I don't know. It might not impact it at all, or it could make him a little more vulnerable to injury. I don't know. So,
and plus, you got late summer and fall. I mean, it's an opportunity for him to hibernate and collect berries or whatever else he did before taking his long between season slumber. Especially if next season we're hearing all these. Woj actually sent a tweet out right before we started recording that the NBA's Board of Governors is discussing delaying the draft, free agency, and the start of next year. We kind of knew this type of stuff was coming, especially as you start to think, what could get people into arenas. If there's a longer layoff, that probably works against a guy like Jokic, who's shown in the past that he tends to thicken up a little bit during the offseason. I'm trying to be very kind about it. We don't want to body shame the guy, but he didn't come into camp in shape. And that's sort of been a thing with him now. That's also been a trend. So, anyway, number 11? No, what are we now?
Number 10.
I promise you I can count. I really can. I
know you. I've heard you count before.
I can do it. I'll do it right on it. No, who's number 10?
Number 10, Giannis, number 10. So this is, obviously I mentioned earlier, the guy that I had at number 10 will probably end up going a lot higher, and I think Giannis goes sort of top 5, I think.
Yeah, he probably goes. I bet he goes top 3 in 8-cat.
Top 3 even, yeah. And obviously the reason there is the free throws. I mean, when you bring up the numbers on Basketball Monster, his free throw percentage there, the impact is bright red. So it's not a category you can really cover for. Obviously if you're going to punt, he moves way up.
That is a deep crimson red. That's not like a shaded pink. That's a deep red.
Yeah, and we've seen games where you think, maybe he's fixed some of these issues, where he'll go sort of 10 of 12 or something, but then he'll do, I think there was a game last week he did 4 of 9, and I mean you look at each individual game and you think, maybe it's not that much of an issue, but you add them all together and it's obviously it equals deep crimson red. So, look, I tend to not draft him unless I'm actively going in and punting free throws.
I'm looking at some of his numbers, and I don't want to. This is not me playing devil's advocate, because everybody that listens to this show has mocked me for hating Giannis, even though he's one of the most exciting players in the NBA. He did. 2016, 2017, he shot 77% at the free throw line. Is there a world where he gets back to that mark? Because if he does, then he is a top 3 guy in 8-cap. But I don't know how you bank on that, though, right? When are you willing? It sounds like you're willing to take that chance towards the end of the first round, but he'll never fall that far.
No, and look, maybe he does, and good luck to whoever drafts him. If that happens, then next season you maybe reassess your projections and your rankings. But I don't know. I just think his shooting technique to me doesn't look. I mean, it's not perfect, obviously, and there aren't many players who are perfect. But I just don't see it as something that can improve dramatically. Look, maybe it does, but. Also, I mean, obviously the 3-point shooting is something he's trying to work on, and he averaged 1.4 this season. But again, he shoots a lot of threes he shoots are air balls as well. So it's not like they're off by a sort of a millimeter, a centimeter, an inch. They miss completely. So it's obviously still really a work in progress. And look, maybe it improves, but I'm just not prepared to take that risk at number 3.
Nor am I. Number 11, who you got?
Kevin Durant at number 11. I wasn't sure where to slot him in, and where he goes, I don't know. I mean, there's a world where people remember back to how good he was, and he goes top 5, but. He was tricky to slot in there. I wasn't exactly sure where he goes, and we're not really going to get a feel for anything until we haven't even seen him back in practice or anything like that. So, look, I just think he'll go. I think he'll go first round. Where he goes will really just depend on who you're drafting against.
Would you take him in the? I know you have him ranked there at the end of the first round. Would you take him in the first round? Because there's a lot of missed game risk on the hook here.
Yeah, I probably. Well, yeah, I don't. Perhaps if I was pick 12 and he was there, I might, only because I know I'm getting the next pick, and I could really sort of compensate the risks with him by picking a really safe guy at number 13.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if he falls that far. I mean, he was the number one fantasy player for quite a few seasons, I think, from memory. So number one, number two. So I think people are going to remember back to that, and I think he ends up going top 10.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to think that he goes towards the tail end of it, like where you've got him. I think this is probably somewhat close to where he ends up dropping. A lot of the names you mentioned, especially an 8-cat, are guys that people want to take a shot with. The Lukas, the Traes, the Cats, the Stephs, the Giannis's. So there's just sort of enough names there where you're kind of forcing KD to like 8 at earliest, and then you're going to get some people in there that are risk-averse like me, where he probably then falls towards 9, 10, 11. So I think where you've got him is probably relatively close to where he goes. I think that's pretty close. Yeah, I think my take on him is actually the same take I have on Kyrie, who I don't know if he's going to be on your list today, but basically, if those guys make it to the second round, I take them with any second-round pick I have. 13 through 24, I will use it on either one of those guys. But I'd rather have KD between the two of them. But these are guys where I'm like, look, the floor is we don't know. Because they could play 40 games, they could play 65, they could play 70. The per-game floor is fantastic, but we need to make sure they stay on the floor. The upside is, for both of those guys, mid to high first round. So at some point, you have to roll the dice on them. And for me, that point is the second round. Who's your number 12? Who rounds out your first round?
It's not Kyrie. I was tempted, but I'm not drafting Kyrie in the first round.
Yeah, he's an easier sell in 9-cat also, at just two and change turnovers a game.
Yeah, he is. And look, per game, as you said, he can be a top 6, top 5 type player. But I don't know, the injury thing really, really worries me with him, which it doesn't with many players, but it does with him. So number 12 for me was Jason Tatum. Again, I'm not sure whether I take him there, but I mean, he's been pretty good this season. A lot better than I thought. I can't remember where I had him in my preseason rankings, but it was nowhere near where he finished.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of those guys where I think a lot of us looked at him and said there's some nice post-hype appeal with him, but I thought, maybe he'd end up in the late 20s to mid-30s. I did not see end of first, beginning of second coming up. I had a feeling he was going to be a value, but not even remotely close to where that turned out to be. I think he was 9. Am I getting this right? He was like around 19 and 8-cat this last year?
Yeah. So top 20, and I think, I haven't got I would say over the back half of the season, he was probably quite a bit more than that.
You know who I might go ahead of him in 8-cat, where you and I can fight a little bit for just this 12th pick, is a guy that I never talk about drafting because he's much more of an 8-cat guy than 9, and that's Devin Booker. I am not a big fan of the Devin Booker fantasy thing, but his close to 4 turnovers a game is a massive drag in 9-cat. And then in 8-cat, he was pretty good. He was 14 this year, played in most of Phoenix's games finally because it looked like they had something to do, and he's showing signs of getting better. He's sort of crested on that do I fear this guy as an opposing team meter, and I think he's on that list now. I think I might go Booker over Tatum if we're going to argue just about the 12th player. We need to have some controversy, right? We've basically agreed about everything else.
Yeah, no, look, I think you could make a case for Booker for sure there. And interestingly, I think when you look at him, there are some similarities to other players, that sort of thing. One thing that actually sort of works in his favor is his efficiency. He's he's not a negative in field goal percentage, even though he's shooting so many shots for the Suns. That's actually a bit of a point of difference for him, is that he is able to convert at almost 50%. When you look at players like Trae Young that we mentioned and Luka and that sort of thing, they're shooting sort of mid 40s. And I mean, 4 or 5%, as we know in fantasy, makes a big difference. So, look, I could get on board with Booker there at that sort of spot, and we saw what he did in the bubble. I mean, and when Phoenix are competitive and have something to play for, he was the clear floor leader there. So, yeah, no, absolutely, I can't really argue with that.
Yeah, I'd like to see. I know this is a weird thing to say for a guy that averaged 26 points per game. I think Devin could average more than that. I think he could get up closer to 30, and he probably should, as long as he lets Ricky Rubio make most of the passes. He makes the smart ones, let Rubio do the weird stuff, and try to keep his turnovers down. That's more of a 9-cat issue, I know, but it does feel like he's fixed the things that were always the biggest fears for me, which was field goal percent. And so now there's this peripheral stuff like help with the turnovers, I know it's insane to say, but even more usage, because offensively he's an insane weapon at this point. But anyway, I mean, we're splitting hairs a little bit, you and I felt like I wanted to throw something in there towards the end. That was a fun exercise. First round complete, Adam. Thanks a bunch.
No worries, that was good. It's always good to find something to talk about because there's not much at the moment. Although a tweet did just come through. I mean, we're recording this a little bit early, but Zach Collins is done. He's having surgery on his ankle, so not that's a huge thing, but it's something.
It is something. It is something. He is the great Adam King at AdamKing91 on Twitter. He's a hoop baller, and he's getting you ready for next year already. Have a great weekend, man. I know that I know this pod is airing on Monday, but enjoy your Saturday.
We will. We're actually. It's very cold, very wet, but we're going out to look at a few houses today. We may be looking at moving house. So
wow.
we thought we'd get out and into the public and do a few things and look at some houses. So it should be fun.
What's that like to go out in public? We haven't done that here in half a year. Good luck, Kingmaker. Make it so.
Thank you. I'll talk to you again soon.
You certainly will.
All right.
I'm going to pause the record. And that was our good buddy Adam King at AdamKing91 on the Twitter. We'll be talking to him not too long from now. He's always got something fun up his sleeve, working on cool ideas. That guy's got a great brain on his settled. I wanted to call it a delicious brain. It's such a zombie thing to say. You guys might start to think I'm a zombie. We've mostly talked about now what happened over the weekend, not necessarily in terms of kind of the game to game, but the results, with the exception of two series. I want to talk about two series real quick before we finish things up today. One of those, because Boston and Philly is done, we don't need to really talk more about that one all that. Well, you know what? Actually, let's make it three. So, I don't want to need to talk about Toronto, Brooklyn. Toronto looks great. Brooklyn had no chance because they didn't have any of their players with them. Boston, honestly, I wasn't super impressed with this first round. Philly was outclassed in this series, which is sort of disappointing because it's not as though they didn't have capable basketball players. Still had Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, Al Horford, Josh Richardson. These are all guys that we've said really good things about, but they never felt like they were getting good shots. And I know Boston's defense is pretty good. They're always going to be sort of tenacious on that side of the ball, but it didn't ever seem like Philly had a line of attack besides see what happens when Joel Embiid has the basketball. It's not a horrible way to go, but there were long stretches in that series where it felt like Philly was playing better when Al Horford was in and Embiid was out, and there was just sort of ball movement and confidence. And I don't know, maybe you guys saw something different than I did, but when I watched Philadelphia's body language, when Embiid was on the floor, it didn't seem like the guys around him were all that excited. And I don't think that's Embiid's fault. The issue there, of course, is that he is, quite frankly, a lot better than the other guys on offense. And so when he's in there, it's like, look, give it to me. This is our best chance to get something going. But at the same time, there was just no ball movement. They were just sort of attacking the same thing over and over and over again. And he got a ton of free throws and he piled up numbers. But then you looked at some of the other stuff going on, and it just, you got this feeling like Philly was looking around as if to say, if I miss this shot, will I ever get it again? Will I touch the ball again? And they fought, give them credit, they fought tooth and nail right to the very end. They ended up losing this game by only 4 points, so they did actually cover the spread. So give Philly credit for fighting even when down 3-0. But offensively, I didn't like what they were doing. Kemba Walker had a really big one, kind of a finally thing going on. Jason Tatum was very good again. Even our guy Daniel Tice got in the mix. Marcus Smart, he's seeing big playing time. I mean, he was going to anyway, but he's a starter now with Gordon Hayward out for a few more weeks. Hayward, by the way, leaving the bubble to rehab presumably with his family, because his wife is like 9.25 months pregnant at this point. And then Jaylen Brown had a rare slow game. So, Celtics kind of did their same stuff, and they were fine. Kemba looked really good. Tatum looked really good. But they weren't, to me, overwhelming in this series. And for Philly, they're just a poorly constructed team. That's it. They built their roster to contend with Milwaukee, but they sort of forgot that there were going to be other good teams along the way, and then Ben Simmons' injury, of course, a massive, massive blow that they didn't really ever recover from. This is a team that needed more shooting, they needed more floor spacing, and they needed more methods of attack. When Ben Simmons went out, they got exposed for just having no real transition game, no real half court besides Embiid in the post. It was weird. Boston's going to have their hands full in the next round. It's going to be anything. It's going to be far from a cakewalk. Toronto is very good. So at least we know one matchup for the next round. I do think the Raptors win that series. I think the Raptors win it in probably 6 or 7 games. It's going to be a deep one. But to me, Toronto, they didn't have quite the same test. Brooklyn was not as good as Philadelphia. Not close. But just from a who can do what standpoint, I think Toronto has the right pieces to tackle Boston well. And then hopefully with Kyle Lowry turning his ankle, he'll have enough time to get that right. I want to jump over Clippers-Mavs because that was amazing, and straight to Denver-Utah, because with every game in this series, I feel more vindicated in saying Denver's not going to win anything unless they guard somebody. And it's such an old, stupid adage that anyone can crack off, but Jamal Murray, huge ball game, didn't matter. Donovan Mitchell had 1 more point. Mike Conley had 26. Clarkson had 24. They're literally not guarding anyone. This is Utah we're talking about. Not exactly known for having the most premier offense in the league. And I get it. Once a guy gets going like this with Donovan Mitchell, it's going to be hard to slow him down, but you got to take some responsibility for letting him get going. I will say this series remains basically a coin flip, and so, Denver, they could very easily swing it back in their direction with a little bit of effort on the defensive side. But right now, you're not seeing it. I mean, Utah shot 58% in this ball game. They only won by 2 because Denver's really good on offense. But, geez, good gravy. So we'll see. All right, that'll about wrap it up. That's all I wanted to talk about on stuff over the weekend. Should be another fun day of games. They start in about a half an hour from the time that I'm finishing recording this podcast. Big shout out once again to our buddies over at manscaped.com. They've been terrific partners to this point. I hope you guys have tried out their stuff. You can use promo code HoopBall20 over at manscaped.com to check out the Lawnmower 3.0 with freshly integrated LED technology. You got a light built into that sucker. It's waterproof, 7,500 RPMs, 90 minutes of charging time. It's doing all the things you need it to. That is the Lawnmower 3.0 over at manscaped.com. Promo code to get 20% off and free shipping is HoopBall20. I would say, please do check that out. So far, everybody that has told me they've enjoyed it. That's quite a few of you, actually, to this point. So again, that's manscaped.com. Shout out once again to our buddies at mybookie.ag. I am Dan Vespers. Thank you to Adam King for once again bringing fantasy to the mix these days. He's AdamKing91 on Twitter. I'm at Dan Besbris. I will talk at you guys again tomorrow. Have a great Monday, everybody. So long.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.